I'm afraid that
it's so strange because I only speak Korean to my parents.
I'm afraid of being away from my loved ones.
Family to
Sung Kim, Yeon Kim, Diana.
First person to get it.
And my mom was my dad was one of his jobs. He was
and then she's never talked to her brother since. I don't know why he did that, but he did come to my first birthday and she got very upset, so she told him to leave. I don't think my father even knows. He just knows that because and he's the one who told me a few years ago, and my mom has never talked about it. And my first birthday party pictures, she doesn't look very happy. And I think it's because
both of them are we would celebrate Christmas and I would get Christmas gifts. But it's just amazing that they put together the next day at school I could say I got this and that, make all these things happen that I really, the other kids got really piano lessons, very dance lessons, big birthday parties, so they would save money throughout the year so that I would have a big birthday party like that, and they didn't do anything for themselves, so I had a really happy childhood because of them. I would like a girl, maybe. No, I don't. I sometimes do not want to have. Well, my father, he spent. I guess. And Sungwon, he really encouraged Korean and English, creative things. It's so strange because I only speak Korean to my parents. When I said I wanted to make my own shirts, we went to the store. 엄마 많이 사랑했어. Fabric paint. 하고 he didn't spank me growing up or anything like that, and spanking and that's kind of normal for Korean people actually. And I didn't grow up like that, but and my parents and my dad and I were so close, and he was such a gentle person. So your grandparents, it really broke my heart that he did that. Really much. Didn't have much money. They gave me everything they had, even though they really didn't have. They sent me to a school with a lot of really privileged kids, and they worked extremely hard to give me a good life. And I was I was the only Asian person in my grade for the first 6 years of my school. 6 or 7 years.
할 얘기 없어. 그냥 하얀 거야. 알았어. 엄마 나 집에 올 때 삼계탕 만들어줄 거야?
그렇지. 나 뭐 일단 해줄게. 삼계탕?
응.
근데
Well, yesterday I was talking to my mother because I told her that I missed her chicken soup, and I was telling her that I really
이놈이 9시 때 자는 거 아니야?
can't get this soup here, and
엄마 9시 때 자잖아.
I can't order it or anything like that, and I don't know how to make it, and only she can make it. And then I just
엄마 깨워.
cried a little bit, but maybe I was just kind of hormonal or something, because I normally do not cry about the chicken soups and stuff.
Okay. My mom's sleeping already. Should I keep talking to my dad? Okay.
recently that I would like to transition first, because I don't want to live in this life without them. And but then my mom said that would be incredibly painful if I died and she was still living, because it's unnatural to bury your child. And so I don't want to really but between the two of them, I don't know, because I feel like they're both like really healthy, and they do all this stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure there's a very good chance they'll survive me, actually, because my dad and my mom are like complete health nuts. My dad always sang "Yesterday" by the Beatles. I thought he had written it. He's like a big Beatles dude. And then yeah, he always sang all the Beatles songs, actually. His favorite one, and then he sang "Hey Jude" a lot, and so I knew those since I was really little. Oh yeah, he went to the library, and then he made a bunch of copies and told me to play them.
And you play them?
I did, yeah, when I was a kid.
You play them now?
No. And they worked extremely hard to give me a good life. Thank you. My name is Eunbi Kim. I'm a pianist and host of It Feels Like, a series that I've created as artist in residence here at the Greene Space. Each night in the series is inspired by a specific theme based off of music from my forthcoming album of the same name called It Feels Like. And tonight, I wanted to talk about home, because when Daniel wrote this piece for me, it started by us having a conversation at my kitchen table about my childhood and growing up with my parents and what that experience was like.
So I wanted to explore in this episode the things that we carry from childhood, what we remember about childhood and home and family, and why. So I'm joined by some very special guests. Oh, you know, I every time I play this piece, I get, you know, like a little bit emotional. So it's sorry if I'm like a little bit shaky. Yes, I'm joined by some very special guests today. Performance artist Carmelita Tropicana and Koei duo, who are Eva Ding and Emma Kato. So I would like to first welcome my first guest, Carmelita Tropicana, who's joining us by Zoom. Hi, Carmelita. Oh, let's just wait until you have your sound on.
I just unmuted myself. I want to applaud, you know, for your playing, and I couldn't, you know, I don't think you could have heard it, but it was absolutely beautiful. And I'm sorry I can't be there with you all. I had COVID not too long ago, and I also live with people that, you know, are older, so it's a little bit of a problem. So, but please, you know, let's, I hope we can chat a little, you know, about home and memories and what that was like in terms of childhood.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here. And thank you for joining on Zoom, even though, that's it's what it is. So.
I know.
It's good to see you.
I can't touch you. I can't feel you or smell you.
Well, it's good to see you. I wanted to have you on this episode, Carmelita, because you wrote this amazing podcast and memoir called "That's Not What Happened," and in that podcast memoir, you talk a lot about your family as well, and your memories of home in Cuba, and also immigrating, and about your parents. And I think it's really funny that, well, why don't you tell us why it's called "That's Not What Happened"?
Yes. Well, I was writing the you know, pieces from the memoir, and I started to tell my sister a story that I had written, and she just said, "That's not what happened." And I said, "Oh my God, that's a great title. I'm using it." You know, so there was a back and forth. You know, we collaborate a lot. We're sisters, biological sisters. So we argue about what did happen, because sometimes memories and how we remember things may be very different in terms of who remembers what. So, but I think it's a great title. That's not what happened, because who can, you know, you try to be as factual as you possibly can, but memory is a little fuzzy.
I agree. And I think about that when I perform this piece, because I mean, I feel like sometimes it depends when I'm performing it. I have that same thought. That's not what happened. I mean, that's some parts of what happened. I mean, that's one side of my parents. And then, you know, this was a long conversation I was having with Daniel, and a lot of it was redacted. And then some of it you could hear that, you know, there were, I mean, of course I had a very, very complicated relationship with my parents. And I think growing up, there were some really difficult times with my parents. And then depending on the day, depending on the time, depending on what I'm going through, and I'm playing this piece, sometimes I do sometimes think that's not what happened, or that's not all that happened. Yeah, that's probably more appropriate. That's not all that happened. And that can be very difficult. So when you were writing your podcast memoir, I mean, was that challenging for you to talk about your family? Because I come from a culture where you really never talk about your family. You never, ever say anything good or bad about your family. Or maybe only good things, but never bad things.
Yeah. I have a feeling that, you know, our cultures kind of become similar in that sense. My sense of, like, even with my mother, I still ask her about things, and you know, she will say, and my grandmother did also, like, you don't tell that to your friends. That's just for family to know, but not your friends. And to me, my friends are, in a way, my family, because I grew up here and I have friendships that are very deep friendships. So I wouldn't want to just be filtering a lot of the things that I say to them. So yes, you know, you're not supposed to talk about certain things. And what I did in my podcast, I made sure that I talked about two people, mostly, you know, and I picked those two people because they had a great deal of influence on how I became who I became as a performer and as a human being. But they're both dead. And they weren't going to argue with me. They weren't going to say that's not what happened, you know. So I picked two dead people, you know, and that's worked out, you know, kind of okay.
So when you were writing the podcast and the memoir, you weren't worried at all about anybody being upset with you?
Yes, of course, yes. In fact, I started asking, you know, people. I started asking an ex-girlfriend who I have a great relationship with, and I said, "Do you mind if I?" "Oh no, please don't." My mother, you know, "Oh no, please don't." You know, it's like, who was left? They would say, "No, please don't write." So, you know, so I had to parse it out and sort of, you know, think about it. But I think what's really interesting about if you really go into a memoir and, you know, writing as much as you can and really dig deep into you, some of the things that you've been always told yourself as a story, like, oh, my father was like this, my father was like that, then you really, you know, sit down and you remember things. And you'd be surprised that what you thought, you know, may not have been as true, or you know, you're more accepting of who that person was at the time. So my father was a very complicated figure because, you know, he fought in Cuba's revolution. He was a comandante. So he, you know, he was in and out of our lives. So that's a very different, you know, kind of, we didn't grow up with him. So it's a difficult it's a difficult person to write about and be kind of honest, but not, when I've been dealing with him, I don't feel any kind of bitterness or anything. I mean, you know, I'm too old. So I don't feel that. And, you know, but it's really good to remember, you know, and I always thought, oh, I'm not like him at all. And the more that I thought about it, the more my life as a performer sort of had similarities with his life. So there you have it.
I feel the same way. I think that's kind of how this piece that I played, It Feels Like a Man Chasing Me, was born, because I think I got to a point, or I was going through a certain time in my life where, I should preface by saying I was very angry at my parents for a period of time. And there's even a period of time where I didn't think I would even speak to my father anymore. And then there was this really great opening in my life where I started thinking about them and thinking about the different things that they did do for me. Yeah. And so those are the things that you hear about in the piece, like the birthday parties. So that home video, that's me on my 6th birthday party, and all the things that went behind that. And my parents were so ashamed growing up of not having money. They were so ashamed of their jobs and what they did for work. So I was never even allowed to tell my friends growing up what they did for work, because they didn't want, they feared that I would be ostracized, you know, by my classmates if they knew my parents did, you know, were working class, you know. And so when I was actually very worried about my parents, because I thought they were still, I thought they would be mad at me when I performed this piece. And it turns out it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you remember that, or I can't believe that's what you take from it, the Christmases and the birthdays and that time that we did all these things. So I think memory can be, I don't know, can be kind of tricky. It depends maybe what you're experiencing or going through in that moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, you know, when you're looking at it from years after, I also was very angry, when I was a kid at my father, and, during my teenage years, all of that happened. But, then you get to a point where, if you work on it, and, I just don't have any kind of even physical anger or anything. I mean, I think he did the best he could. He's not somebody, we weren't close, but he accepted a lot of parts of me. So, and he was always proud of what I did. So, you kind of cut people slack, and I'm not sure that he, was meant to be so much of a parent, but he, so it's a weird situation, but you try to be as understanding as you possibly can.
Yes,
So.
for sure. So in one of your episodes, you write about your grandmother's famous flan recipe. And I know food, you mentioned food a lot in your memoir. And I mentioned food in this piece, how chicken soup is what I connect with my mom, samgyetang, which is like a Korean chicken noodle soup.
Yes, yeah.
Can you share about this famous flan recipe of your grandmother's?
Yes. Do you want me to read?
Oh,
I
not yet.
assume that I am
Not
being
yet.
read? Oh, not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. Oh, good.
Just tell us
this
about
is more
it.
real. It's like, am I reading? No. Okay. Well, my grandmother was a really good cook, because she was a very much of a home cook, and she really, she had to make the most out of, the little that she had. And when we came to this country, we really had no money. We were all living. I mean, you're talking about, also how you live. And we lived in Forest Hills, and we weren't, at one point, there were 13 of us for about like a couple of months in one, 2-bedroom apartment. And we had to hide. We couldn't go. It was a very fancy apartment building at the time. It was newly built. So we were told as kids, there were 5 kids, living there. And we were told, do not ever go, through the lobby, and if they catch you, if you go anywhere and they catch you, please don't say where you live. So there was that kind of poor, sort of like, and you try to make the best that you can. And my grandmother could make really wonderful food, really being very careful. I remember, my father would make fun of her, and yet, she was wonderful with the food that she made, with the little that she had. And she had to be frugal, very frugal. But that upset her. She didn't want that. And my father would make fun of her frugality, but she had to, because she had mouths to feed. So yeah, the whole idea of, how she had to make things. And for the flan recipe, when I once asked her about the flan recipe, she was very protective and really wanted to hold on, possessive about her recipes. So I asked her, Mima, my friend tasted your flan. She loves it. Can you give me the recipe? And she goes, yes, I will. I'll write it down for her. And then she goes to my house and she says, this is your recipe and this is her recipe. So it was 2 different recipes. And it's like,
hold on,
how
one?
could you do that? And because she wanted to keep it in the family. So.
Well, we don't have your grandmother's flan with us tonight, but we do have flan to distribute to our audience. As you share some readings from your...
And I heard there was popcorn too. I was so jealous. I could have used a little popcorn.
There's a lot of snacks tonight. I mean, we're not even, we're just beginning.
It's
fabulous. So we have flan for the entire audience. And why don't you tell us what flan is?
Flan is a very traditional Spanish recipe. It comes from Spain, but all throughout the Caribbean, people have flan. And even it's even come into the American. I mean, people know flan these days. I think it's something that people have grown up with, or at least it's a little, Spanish food is a little better known, and Mexican, also. But this is traditionally from Spain, and it's a custard. It's an egg custard, and it's sweet. But the way my grandmother makes it, it's a very nuanced flan. Very easy to make, but you have to be careful because when you're burning the sugar to make the caramel, many a time, you'd know, who had made the flan because they sometimes had burn marks. So it was one of those things that you had to really be careful not to be wounded making the flan for Christmas. But it's a recipe that's passed on. And this podcast was actually, commissioned by Soho Rep, which is an amazing theater, and it produced produced and directed by my sister, who's also the person who had the "That's Not What Happened" title for me. And my sister is a great collaborator. And I can, it was, we both loved my grandmother's flan recipe. We called her Mima because she didn't want to be known as grandma. It was like too old. But Mima, it was like a different name altogether. So if you want me to, I can read, or I can keep talking about the good recipes, because I came from a very much of a family that food was really important. My mother and I, it's like, sometimes I wake up and think, or even at night, I think, what am I going to have tomorrow? So, and I've cooked a lot during COVID time. It's been amazing, like a little too much.
Well, we are ready for you. We're still
All right.
distributing the flan, but we're distributing and enjoying while you have your reading.
Yeah,
We're ready
and
for
if
you.
anybody wants the flan recipe, go to my, go to the SoundCloud, Carmelita Tropicana, and you'll get the recipe there. And if not, I can send it to you if you go to my website. Mima's flan. I had a girlfriend who once called me a food slut. There may be some truth to that. I'm obsessed with food. I have many rich memories that are food related. I remember picking wild blueberries on a mountain. They were tart, so different than the blander store-bought ones, and smelling the fresh baked bread scent that wafted into my apartment on Cornelia Street from Zito's Bakery, and tasting manchego cheese for the first time in Spain with Jose, my friend, who was an incredible foodie who I shared many a food adventure with. Jose, a queer theorist known for his legendary 4th of July celebrations, Salads of the World Unite. And he had us bringing salads to be judged in a competition for best in show, most gay, and most subaltern. I usually ask people if they are foodies and then test them. Would you walk a mile under pouring rain to savor Joe's Stone Crabs at its Miami Beach restaurant? My mom and I did, and she was 80 at this time. We are both foodies, which makes me think of my food obsession. Is it in my DNA? Did it come from my grandfather who was in the restaurant business in Cuba? Or maybe it's been passed down through my matriarchal line of my grandmother and her sisters, Angelina, who we called Nina, who was the eldest, the caretaker, and Vindita, the youngest. They were all good cooks. And all three, Nina, Mima, my grandmother, and Vindita, were competitive when it came to food. Angelina had the best parties, though. There were amazing celebrations, and like Jose's 4th of July parties, they had as much ambiance as umpteen plates to savor. There was Nina's celebration of my mother's quinceañera. That's the sweet 15th birthday party. And Nina designed and made my mother's dress that vied with a cake as a pièce de résistance, a legendary cake that lives in my memory, though I did not see it. Both my mother and Nina described the cake. It was shaped into a rectangle with a square left in the middle where there's a mirror simulating a lake. On top of the mirror sat a basket of sweetheart roses. There were pink ribbons attached to the center of the basket, and at the stroke of midnight, the guests, all teenagers in evening wear, pulled on the ribbons, and the basket opened and 2 turtle doves flew out. Actually, Nina remembers one had to be pushed out. They circled the room, and the sound of their flapping wings mixing with the oohs and the ahs from the guests until they found the window and flew out into Havana's midnight sky. I never heard what the cake tasted like, and perhaps Nina got carried away with the cake decorations. But when it came to dessert and flan, my grandmother's flan was perfection in its simplicity. It was a traditional Spanish flan, just like she was traditional, and how she wanted her life to be: measured, controlled, balanced. No highs, no lows, no big bangs, a subtle flan. It was not too thick, but a silky texture you could spoon, not too sweet, nuanced and elegant. I have her handwritten flan recipe, and I could almost see her sitting writing it very carefully as if she's practicing calligraphy. She lists the ingredients first, and then below she writes, como yo lo hago, how I make it. So you can go to my, SoundCloud, put in, Carmelita Tropicana, and you can get the recipe, or you can even go on my website and I'll send you the recipe. There was a couple of people who actually heard my podcast reading at Soho Rep, and actually, they made the recipe, and it was very sweet to see them, taking pictures of it and showing me that they too had made flan. So so that's how we remember. And also our memories are memories of our parents that are not really true memories, but they live inside of us as if almost they were our own memories. So it's really, that's also an interesting kind of concept, that it's not, I didn't go to the sweet 15th birthday party, but I always heard about it. So I think, that's almost my memory in some ways, or a story of that memory. So.
Thank you, Carmelita. Let's have a round of applause for Carmelita.
Thank you. I wish I'd been there with Eunbi, and I wish I'd been there with you people.
But thank you.
Thank you.
So now I'm gonna read some answers from our audience about what home means. Whoops. Now I'm gonna read some answers from the audience about what home means to them. So there are a couple here. When I think of home, it feels like a fortress and a loving hug. Oh, that's very sweet. A warm blanket or sweater. The smell of patis. Am I pronouncing that right? Patis. Fish sauce lingering. Very interesting. Okay. When I think of home, it tastes like, bananas, devil dog, brisket, and sinigang. Is that correct? Sinigang. I want to know what that is. Who wrote this one? Brisket and sinigang? Okay, what is that? Oh, sinigang is a Filipino fish soup. I'll check it out. Well, thank you for our audience answers. We are now ready. Oh, whoops. Okay, well, next I'm going to perform a piece for you, speaking of home. It's called Tumbao by Tanya Leon. And speaking of home, in her own words, it's a compositional mix of her roots, Bach and Cervantes, and her memories of her grandmother giving her first instrument, a toy piano. So this is Tumbao by Tanya Leon. we're gonna hear from some kids now, from our expert kid panel on Home for Them.
One thing that I like that my mom makes is this Japanese fried rice called omurice. It's fried rice wrapped in egg. Oh, I like miyoku because it has seaweed and meat and broth in it. It's soup and it's super good. Seaweed. So it's salty and crunchy, and I just gobble it down in a second, basically. Hello, my name is Sage, and I'm gonna answer some food questions.
What's your favorite snack you get in the store?
Doritos. Because it's nice and hot, but not too hot, and it's really crunchy. Oh, we have these little chips, vegetable chips, and they're really good. They're really salty and surprisingly healthy. I like this dry curry with tomatoes, potatoes, and chicken with rice. Ramen? Well, at the store at like H Mart, a Korean supermarket, they have like these sweet drinks, like the yogurt drinks. No, not
The pororo drinks? Those are yogurt drinks.
My favorite food is orange, and because they're orange and they're like a banana but not long, but they're short, and they're not the color of a banana, but they're orange and as a color. But like an orange is also a fruit, so I can't really do it. Anyways, next question.
Thank you to our wonderful kids and their families for participating in our Kid Expert videos. Speaking of favorite snacks, I'm going to share with you some of my favorite snacks. So I think snacks, the chicken soup reminds me so much of home. Thank you, Jennifer. Yes, all my favorite snacks. And snacks have a lot of great memories for me, and childhood and home. And I think I'll carry like a lot of nostalgia as well. So when I was a kid, maybe I can move this. Hold on. Okay. So when I was a kid, we had a weekly ritual with my family. Every week they went to the American grocery store, Giant, and then they went to Lotte, the Korean grocery store. So pre-H Mart, there was Lotte. And the weekly ritual was that my mom always let me and my sister have one snack. So as soon as we would enter Lotte, we would run to the snack aisle, and then I would pick one snack, my sister would pick another snack, and then, lots of careful selection going on. But usually I picked this guy, this pepero. So this probably looks like the Pocky that you get. Now they're everywhere. They're even at Costco. They're really great. I would get, usually this was my favorite. And then my sister would get some candy, kind of like this one, like these little gummy candies. And then we would go to the register by ourselves, because my mom would give me the $5 and we would pay for it. And then we would walk around the store looking at everything and eating our little snacks while my mom did her shopping. So I'll share with you a little bit of my snacks. I think the snacks and going to Lotte every week was an important memory from childhood, because that was one of the only times I also saw other Korean people, because as I mentioned in the piece, there were no Korean people or Asian people at the school I went to. And so it was almost kind of like a community center where we would always run into people that we would normally never see.
And this was in Rockville, Maryland, where I grew up, my hometown. So I'll go with you some of these. So probably you all have heard of H Mart, which is a Korean grocery store. These snacks are all from H Mart, and we're gonna distribute them at the end of the show tonight. So you'll get to try some if you're not familiar. So we have the pepero. I'll show you what it looks like. I liked these so much because they were so convenient to eat as you walked around the store. You know, because like it would have the chocolate and then it would have this, so you don't get messy. You know, so it's so satisfying. So I'll have one now. Sorry. Okay. Okay, and then we have these little gummy candies. Lots of gummy candies. That's a really good. You know, they said it's going to be awkward to eat on stage, and they were right. I might not do it, but yeah, my favorite is the lychee flavor. This is very, very delicious. And then this is also really good. I don't know what these are called because it's all like in a different language. It's all in Japanese. But I just look for the bear, and sometimes it's like a koala illustration. So if you look for the bear or the koala, then this is it. It's filled with little chocolate in it. And then there's a variety of shrimp chips. These are so delicious. These are like the original. Well, there were original shrimp chips, but these are yuzu flavored, wasabi flavored. They have all kinds of different flavors now, which is very exciting. And then this one looks like regular chips, but they're shrimp chips. These are really good. These are really good with beer, actually, when you're watching Korean dramas. But but I can't have beer. I'm pregnant. So, but anyway, these are really good. And I'm going to share some more snacks with my next guest. They are Eva Ding and Emma Kato of Koei Duo. Come on by. Welcome.
I brought some snacks to share with you as well.
Wow, thank you. What are these, Eva?
These are 大白兔, which translates to white rabbit. And
show them.
Yes.
Show. So they look like this.
They're kind of creamy, milky candies. And what were really special to me was that they're wrapped in rice paper so that they don't get sticky in your hands, but you can eat the rice paper. And I think when I was young, that blew all of my classmates' minds because it looks like a piece of really thin, almost like cigarette paper or wax paper or something like that. And they were, at first, all my non-Chinese classmates were really skeptical about this because they were like, we don't want to eat paper. Like, what are you making us do? And then as soon as it dissolved in their mouths, it was like magic.
So these candies, you told me, take you back to your childhood, right?
Absolutely.
And we have these also for our audience afterwards. Yes. So we'll have all of these available for you, for everybody. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Absolutely. So I was born in Shanghai, and then when I was about 5 or 6, my parents made this huge sacrifice so that they could take me to New Zealand, and that's where I was raised. And so my dad stayed back in Shanghai to look after his parents, my grandparents, and to continue on his career. And me and my mum moved when I was about 6 to Auckland, New Zealand. And that's where I stayed, and that's where I grew up and was raised. And then I kind of, and they stayed together, they're still married to this day, but they, because for me, for the sake of a brighter future for me, they thought that was the right choice, and it totally was. I could not be more thankful to them. And then I came here in 2017 for grad school, so I kind of did a version of that myself, and that I traveled all the way, halfway across the world so that I could better my own future. And and that's how I'm here.
Amazing, amazing. And these candies take you home, take you back to memories of home?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I could not even tell you why, but I think they, in New Zealand, especially 15-ish, 20 years ago, like international foods was not that big of a thing. But we would go to, as you mentioned, like we would go to like a Chinese grocery store and they would have these imported. And I think these must have also been the treat or the candy of my mom's childhood too. And so she was the one that introduced me to these. And then, I mean, they're candy. What kid isn't going to be hooked by like sweet, creamy candy, right? So, yeah.
Tell us about the project that you and Emma have created.
Absolutely.
Yeah, about your parents, which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah. So back in November of last year, I created, as part of an artist residency, a project titled For Mom, Dad. And it was a kind of interdisciplinary love letter to immigrant families and especially immigrant parents and the sacrifices that they make for us. And we played chamber music by composers all of Asian heritage. And we had a visual projection behind us that kind of showcased the journey of the immigrant. And we had kind of 3 sections. We had Songs from Home, and then Journey to New Lands, and then Newfound Home. And we played different pieces that kind of reflected those moments. Yeah.
The piece that I heard from that performance, Something to Say by Corey Chang, I love that piece. Where does that happen in those three sections of that piece?
Yeah. So that happens in the 3rd section, Newfound Home. And it's so funny the way that we kind of got together with Corey. We had a mutual friend who recommended him, and I listened to his music, and I was like, oh my goodness, like I have to program his work. And I had listened to a violin, cello, piano trio on his website, and I reached out to him and said, and I told him about the show and all its values, and I said, I'd really like to program this piece. Would you mind if I arranged it for flute, cello, and piano? And Corey, who is like our age, he's so humble, and he said, I actually consider that piece one of my earlier works. And I'm like, earlier? Like, how old are you? And because he felt so connected to the material and to all the other pieces and the story that we were trying to tell, he said, I would love to just write a piece for you, and what should the parameters be? And I told him, perfect. How honored would we be for you to do that? And I told him, would love to program you towards the end where, we talk about after all this craziness and feeling perhaps alone in a foreign country, lost in a foreign country, sad, angry, you come and you find your people and your found family and your community, and there's that feeling of feeling settled, but also a feeling of not ever forgetting where you come from and your own roots.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Are you guys ready to play some music for us?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is Something to Say by Corey Chang. Let's give a round of applause for Koei Duo.
Thank you. I have something. Something. I have something. 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 To say what I have to say, what I long to say, what I long, what I have, what I have, what I have, what I have, what I have to, what I have to, what I have, what I have, what I long. What I long to, what I have to, 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 what I long to, what I have to. say what I long to
Eva Ding on flute, Emma Kato on cello. They are Koei duo. Thank you. That's to conclude our episode for tonight. I'd like to thank Koei duo and also Carmelita Tropicana. And tomorrow's episode, we have a creative playdate with composer and performer Angelica Negron, DJ and dancer Miley of Layer Rhythm Experiment Project, and comedian and violist Isabella Hagen. So if you would like to join us tomorrow or tune in. And then Thursday is our final night, and we will be exploring the theme of chaos. And we'll have astrologer Jonathan Coe and electronic flutist Gina Izo and many other special guests. So thank you all for being here tonight, and we hope you enjoyed and stick around afterwards to share some snacks together. So thank you.